If we look at the Middle East, I think it's about time we stop, those of us who support, as most of us do, Israel in this body, for apologizing for our support for Israel. There's no apology to be made. None. It is the best $3 billion investment we make. Were there not an Israel, the United States of America would have to invent an Israel to protect her interest in the region. The United States would have to go out and invent an Israel.
Welcome to Fight Back Radio, production of fightbacknews.org, taking you to the heart of the people's struggle. I'm your host, Richard Berg, and welcome to Black History Month 2024. Here at Fight Back Radio, we want to encourage all our listeners to, pick up a book about Black history, go to a program. I'm sure there's many in the community. This is a time, and we should be learning about Black history because it's working class, it's the people's history all the time. But because February is Black History Month, it gives us a chance to say, let's do it. Let's remind ourselves that this is the case. I want to recommend 3 authors to you, and I want to encourage our Fight Back Radio listeners, if you have a book or an article or anything else you think people should check out, put it in the comments. And if you want to see what our readers or our listeners are thinking, look at the comments and see what they say. Also, if there's a program in your city or your area that you want to promote, put it in the comments, and so that people can see that. It also helps people find Fight Back Radio. I guess comments move us up in the algorithm there. So, but the 3 books or 3 authors I want to recommend, not the books, but one is the first one is W.B. Du Bois, and if you haven't read something by him, you should. If you have, you can read another thing by him because he wrote a lot, and he was intelligent. He lived a long time. He wrote 3 autobiographies, but particularly he wrote about John Brown. He wrote for sociology, a groundbreaking study on Philadelphia. I think most importantly was his book on Black Reconstruction. Others can disagree with me. But I think for me that was a game changer in really understanding Reconstruction and debunking the lies that people of my generation and probably before and after have been taught about what Reconstruction really was and how that worked. And he really broke it down. The second author I want to recommend is Harry Haywood. His autobiography is called Black Bolshevik, and he was one of the people who helped develop what we call the revolutionary position on the black national question here in the United States. And this has been debated, for a century now since it was adopted, and tweaked and whatever. But I think you should check out Harry Haywood. His autobiography talks not just about him, but also about the history of that line and the debate and things that went on around that within the Communist Party and since. But also, he wrote a book called Black Liberation and a number of other articles and things. So, check out Harry Haywood as one. And the last person I want to recommend is Frank Chapman, who's written 2 books. One is, and I think the more important one is Marxist-Leninist Perspectives on Black Liberation and Socialism. And it tackles this dynamic and really analyzes, from a historical materialist perspective, how our movement, a workers' movement, when it centers, oppressed nationalities, and especially the Black liberation movement, it moves forward, and when it doesn't, it moves backwards. And it's a fascinating analysis. That's a book I highly recommend. His other book, not to give it short shrift, is called The Damned Don't Cry. It's his memoirs, and also a good book. So those are 3 books 3 authors I would recommend for Black History Month. If you have another, please let us know. And check out a program as well. I know Freedom Road here in Chicago, we're going to be doing a program on Black History Month. Others around the country probably are as well. Put them in the show notes or in the comments. Also, I want to say There's my union, the Chicago Teachers Union, is doing events throughout the month. And you check out, it's not hard to find. There's things going on in your city, in your area as well. And if there's not, get a bunch of people together, have a discussion, do it yourself. So Black History Month is important, and it's a reminder of the importance of Black history. So anyways, with that little digression, I want to move on to, we have a great guest today. For those of you who've been Fight Back Radio listeners from the beginning, our guest today was our first guest almost 2 years ago, Kobi Guillory. But today he's back to talk about the March on the Democratic National Convention. And the Kobi went on to become the spokesperson for the coalition to march on the Democratic National Convention. But he has his old jobs as well. He's a co-chair of the Chicago Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. He's on the executive board of the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. He's a middle school teacher, which along with all middle school teachers and middle school parents, I would say nominates you for sainthood. But yes, so he's a leader in the Chicago Teachers Union and the Human Rights Committee. So he's just, you'll hear the depth of his knowledge, but particularly he gives voice to us as we get together and start to move towards this March on the Democratic National Convention. And particularly, as we're going, as we're releasing this now, the things that are happening in the Middle East, and the devastation and genocide happening to the Palestinian people, it's important that we support their resistance, that we support them, and that we be willing to criticize the Democratic Party and stand up. And the lesser of two evils is not getting us there right now. We need to have some voice. So I encourage people to actually come to the Democratic Party March on the Democratic Party National Convention, which will be here in Chicago here in Chicago on August 19th. So hopefully we'll see you then. And with no further introduction, here's Kobi Guillory. So welcome to Fight Back Radio, Kobi.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great. So I want to ask you, you're the spokesperson for the Coalition to March on the Democratic National Convention here in Chicago. But why should people march on the convention? What's your pitch? What are you telling people? Why should they come here and spend their time? Why travel to Chicago? Or if you already live here, why go to this march?
Well, when the DNC comes here in August 19th, that's when the DNC starts, and that's when we're planning our biggest mobilization. It's going to be a meeting of a lot of different people who have made decisions over the past, over however long their political career has been, in service of the rich and powerful. So our goal is to unite the people who are not rich and powerful, working class people, oppressed people, to bring their demands to the doorstep of the Democratic National Convention, because we know that absent of us protesting, without us doing this march and raising up those demands, they're not going to come from inside the Democratic National Convention. So we have to raise up our own agenda, the people's agenda.
Okay, so right now the Congress is split. The Senate is in the hands of the Democratic Party. The House of Representatives is in the hands of the Republican Party. But the commander-in-chief of the United States Armed Forces, the president of the United States, is Joe Biden. And the thing that's in the news the most, that I think right now, is the issue of Palestine. Could you comment a little bit about the coalition's view of what's going on in Palestine and what demands you guys have of President Biden or the Democratic Party?
Yeah, so that's sort of at the headline of our demands. That's the first one that we go over in our unity statement, is that we will fight for the liberation of Palestine, and we demand that no U.S. aid to the Israeli genocide and occupation. And I think we have to bring that demand. It's a very urgent thing at this point. Upwards of 30,000 people have been killed by the Israeli occupation forces, not just in Gaza, but also in the West Bank and in the 1948 territories. And rather than do anything to bring peace and security to these Palestinians, Joe Biden has spent the past 3 months, defending this genocide and giving U.S. taxpayer money to the Israeli occupation forces so they can continue the genocide. So that's the first of our 7 demands, and I'm sure you'll ask about the other ones as we go along. But just to put some emphasis on it, the reason it's so important is because Palestine is in such a revolutionary position right now. There is a real possibility of bringing an end to this apartheid state that is one of the last real strongholds of settler colonialism in the world that's left, that's still here in the 21st century. So there's that, and then there's also the fact that the Palestinian people have given so much to other liberation struggles around the world. As people may or may not know, I grew up in South Africa, and I'm the children of 2 African American parents. So growing up, I learned a lot about the struggle against apartheid in South Africa specifically, as well as the fight against segregation here in the U.S. And the Palestinian liberation movement has been a friend to both of those. So the ties of solidarity are very strong. And just to bring it back, that's why we are raising up that demand. All the money that Biden and other Democratic leaders have sent to the Israeli occupation forces, we say that every death, every one of those 30,000 people who have been killed, or those upwards of 1 million people who've been displaced, the president of the U.S. bears responsibility for that.
So how do we stop this? I mean, this madness. It seems like Israel and the United States, with the United States backing for sure, if not direction, is doing all the genocide you just described. There's an international movement I hear about boycott, divest, and sanctions. You mentioned you grew up in South Africa. The government of South Africa has recently brought, the United States, or not the United States, Israel, to the International Criminal Court for genocide, charging them with genocide. Is this possible? Can we stop these guys, or are they just going to do whatever they're going to do anyways, and we can't do anything about it?
Well, I think we absolutely can stop them, and we will. It is going to stop. The genocide in Gaza is going to stop. The occupation of Palestine is going to stop. And I'm a little bit younger than you, but I believe that it's going to happen in both of our lifetimes. And the reason that South Africa is bringing this case to the International Court of Justice is because they've been subjected to apartheid before. They know what it takes to end it. They understand the urgency of fighting against it, and they know that the way that you beat it is one, by an intense struggle domestically, which is what the Palestinian resistance is doing right now, and which is what the resistance in South Africa did, during apartheid, and then internationally, our role is to apply as much pressure as we can to isolate and make business as usual impossible for the Israeli government. And we do that by making sure that our government revokes its support for the Israeli government. Our tax dollars have been $4 billion a year of our tax money has gone to Israel for a number of years now, and without that, there's no way that they can keep doing what they're doing, not just to Palestine, but also to other countries in the Middle East. And there's historical precedent for the ability of protest and of the mass movement to move the United States government. We just have to put that, step on those pressure points. We have to be there, raising up those demands and, clogging the system, shutting things down until we get what we want.
Yeah. So, so this is part of an international pressure point. I see you're wearing the keffiyeh for solidarity with the Palestinian sisters and brothers. But yeah, let me go back to this a little bit because I see that I've seen polling that shows something like 80% of Democratic voters support the Palestinians or ceasefire or some sort of thing like that. Yet you see that's not the case with the leadership. I mean, the votes that have taken place in the House of Representatives, here in the City Council in Chicago, some of these things, the Democratic Party leaders seem to be not a part of this. And there's a certain amount of debate, I think, going on within their party. Is it the hope of the march to affect that debate, or to what's what are we what are we really looking for? What do we hope to accomplish on that day for Palestine?
Well, what we hope to accomplish is to end the genocide. I mean, we want to end it before August. We don't want there to still be bombs being dropped on Gaza by the time the Democratic National Convention comes by. But we want to end U.S. support for the occupation, and what you just mentioned. That's exactly why we're not attending the DNC, and raising it there, because it's very clear, based on the campaign promises that Joe Biden made, that he failed to follow through on or neglected to follow through on. It's very clear that the Democratic Party leadership doesn't listen to its constituents. The voters that have pushed that party across the line, that have helped it win time and time again. Black people, brown people, Chicanos, immigrants, other oppressed people. Those are the people who are leading or who are part of the solidarity campaign for Palestine, and who are calling for an end to the genocide. And there's all these different demands that these different groups of people have that have been ignored by the Democratic Party once they get in power, and they turn around and they either obstruct or they completely neglect to follow through on the demands that these people have made. So, to those people who are members of the Democratic Party or voters for, who vote for the Democratic Party, we call on those people to join us as well at the march on the DNC, so that they can make their voices heard. Because otherwise, we don't expect the Democratic Party leadership to do anything for the people.
Yeah, no, and we had recently on Fight Back Radio here, Marawi Garima, who talked about as a leader of the Black Liberation Movement, why he supported Palestine and why people in the movement supported Palestine, because they were, in his view, were at the these were all people that were oppressed by U.S. imperialism, and that the Palestinians were at the front edge of the fight right now, and it was important to fight that. But he also mentioned and talked a little bit about demands of the Black Liberation Movement, people that pushed the Democratic Party across the finish line more than once. Could you talk a little bit about, as an African American, what are some of the things that that we're protesting? Palestine for sure, but what else? What are some of the demands we have on the Democratic Party that we need to raise at this march?
So, including the demand for Palestine, we also have there's 7 demands in total, so 6 other demands. And I'll just read through them and very briefly talk about why we're bringing these to the Democratic Party specifically. We're demanding immigrants' rights. We're demanding legalization for all undocumented workers. When Biden was campaigning, something that you heard a lot about was the fact that there were kids in cages. The fact that the children of immigrants were kept in these horrific detention centers, and that's still happening. Just because we defeated Trump doesn't mean that went away. Biden is still expanding that border wall. He's still deporting people and separating them from their families. We have some immigrants' rights organizations in the coalition who are bringing that demand to the DNC as well.
Well, let me stop you there. Maybe we can go through them one at a time. But like the immigrant rights question, I think a lot of people would say, look, you're protesting Joe Biden. You're protesting the wrong guy. The Republican presidential candidate is likely to be Donald Trump, and even if it's not Nikki Haley or whoever, they're all bad on this issue. Why aren't we just going the wrong direction? I mean, isn't Biden better? They're threatening to hold up his budget if he doesn't finish the wall and all this kind of business. Why raise this at the Democratic Party convention?
Well, because the fact that Democrats are making policy decisions, not just saying things, but actually doing things that Republicans promised to do, that's a problem. So, just because Biden made some better campaign promises, just because he doesn't speak the same kind of rhetoric that Trump does, doesn't mean that he gets a free pass to deport millions of people, or that it's okay for him to build the border wall or anything like that, or that kids being in cages still under his administration is okay. We're still not okay with those things under Democratic leadership. We are going to be marching on the Republican National Convention as well. When I say we, I mean there are some of our people in the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression are working on that. Are working on building that coalition to march on the RNC as well. So we're taking these demands to both parties because it's very clear that both parties are doing the same terrible things to these oppressed communities, to immigrant communities, as well as other communities.
So we're marching on the Republican convention and Trump, and we're marching on the Democratic Party and Biden. So what do we do then? Is there any alternative at all? Do we not vote? I mean, it sounds like there's nothing we can do. We lack choices. It's like the rich people control everything.
Well, I think what we can do is what we are doing, which is raising up these demands in the streets, and not believing that a presidential candidate is like the champion of the people, because they've shown that they serve the rich and the powerful. So, if Joe Biden wants to win, which the way that he has been acting, the way that he's been reacting to the people's movement, specifically to the movement for Palestine, it's almost like he doesn't want to win, and if he does want to win, then he needs to actually listen to the demands of the people who have voted for him time and time again. So, we have to mobilize. It's not just about who are we going to vote for on one day in November. We have to move the way that we move these politicians is by applying mass pressure, and we do that, all the time. We have to build that all the time, so that we can actually have a hope of moving these politicians. Because what makes things get worse and worse is we get into this spiral where we keep having to vote for the lesser of two evils, and then when they get in power, they basically do what they do what the ruling class does, which is oppress, which is repress the people's movements. So we have to stand up against that, regardless of who is in power.
Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah, I think that's right. I'm looking through your list of demands here. I'm looking down. You have one that's money for jobs, schools, what is it? Healthcare, housing, and I think I'm missing one here.
And the environment.
And environment. Yes, thank you.
Hmm.
And not for war. And I think that probably hits a lot of things. Even I'm looking, the next one I was down is LGBT and women's rights. A lot of this is the Democrats have a tendency to be like, we're not as bad as the Republicans. I mean, you could have safe and free abortions as part of a healthcare plan, or you could have free healthcare across the country without any troubles at all. You could establish, equality for women and enforce it in a real way if you were the ruling power, which the Democrats are in most places. So, I mean, could you speak a little bit to that and how you're trying to change the equation and how to, I mean, there are probably some within the Democratic Party who, whatever we got, the mayor of Chicago has been helpful. He's a former union member of mine and yours. Who's been helpful to us, and some of people have been saying, well, if we had more people like AOC or whatever, but you're saying let's protest these guys, let's put forward our full agenda. They're nowhere close. Am I right about that, or is it, how would you approach this?
Well, as far as money for jobs, school, healthcare, housing, and the environment, and not for war, and the other demands as well, and we'll get more into those. Um, the the budget of the government, that's sort of the core of like what the actual priorities are, regardless of what the rhetoric is. Um, how much money they put into bombing people, who have never done anything to us. Um, it shows where their priorities are. When we have schools that are underfunded, we have people who uh, have no housing, who have no health care, um, people whose lives are getting worse and worse by the year. And we keep seeing the military budgets increase. I mean, pretty much every year that I've been paying attention has been a record spending year for the United States military. And at the same time, we're seeing less and less being given to uh, less and less resources for communities that are already oppressed and already poor. So, we are happy to have politicians who come from the people's movements. Like you said, Brandon Johnson comes from the labor movement. There are other politicians who I think sincerely are fighting for the people. But when those are individuals who are in places of power, the system is kind of built to box them out if they speak up too much. Um, and we still have to keep up that pressure on the system as a whole. Not just hope that a few individuals are going to come through, because like I said, there are ways like how they pushed out Bernie Sanders. There are plans that the system has to neutralize those kinds of individuals who get into places of power. So the best thing that we can do to support those people is mobilize around the demands of the people's movements that brought those people into power in the first place.
Well, let me pivot to another demand that's near and dear to your heart, and may feed back to this issue of budget as well. But the question of stop police crimes and community control of the police. You're on the executive board of the National Alliance Against and Political Repression, the chair of the Chicago Alliance, or co-chair, I should say. I'm sorry. And so this is something you've worked on for a long time. And so, what is and I would even say, even before the alliance, I think the Black Panther Party and others had a demand for community control of the police. So, what does this look like? How does this happen? How do we get this into place? And As a march, I mean, it's good to give, let people, know about the demand, but what do we want the Democrats to do about it?
So the when you look at the biggest mobilizations of the Black liberation movement over the past, like, 50, 60 years, um, they almost all of them have to do with fighting against police crimes. There's the beating of Rodney King, the murder of Michael Brown, um, and then of course the George Floyd rebellion in 2020. And it was the George Floyd rebellion which, I think, in my opinion, uh, made the difference between Biden losing and winning. That really agitated the Black community, and we came out and were the reason that Biden won. So the demand is that the Democratic Party followed through on the campaign promises that they made, specifically around policing. There were um, all these uh, all these different legislations and reforms that were promised, that have not been put into effect. And the lesson that we've learned here in Chicago, fighting for community control of the police, fighting for police accountability, has been that regardless of who is in power, the main thing that we need to focus on is, building a strong people's movement. Getting the people involved, particularly the people who have been impacted by police crimes, who have had loved ones be killed by the police, or who have themselves, or who have loved ones who've been tortured by the police or wrongfully convicted. That's sort of the backbone of the movement, and that's who we are trying to mobilize, and people who care about that, people who care about, people who came out in 2020 because they cared about bringing an end to police violence, bringing an end to police crimes. We're trying to mobilize those people to make sure that the Democratic Party follows through on its campaign demands and actually shows that they are better than the Republicans, rather than continuously saying it as a way to get our votes. They need to actually earn those votes with some actions.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, the rhetoric, I think that's true. Historically, it's been there, but not the actions. Just going down the list, I'm looking at the next one, the supporting the right to unionize and strike. Um, and this one, I know I'm gonna be at the march. I'm a proud union member. Our Fight Back Radio listeners know, and I think that it's important that organized labor stand up, and exercise the power that it actually has. And but I'll tell you this: our leaders are probably not going to be at the march, most of them. And most of them are going to say, "Oh, the Democratic Party, whatever." And they've been doing it for decades and decades and decades. Support the Democratic Party, no matter what. This probably goes back to FDR till now, without no matter who, Mondale, whoever your favorite one is, Clinton, the other Clinton, Dukakis, whoever. And not just on the national level, on the local level, the state level, whatever. And it really hasn't paid off for us. I mean, we keep, I guess, when the Democrats are in there, we don't lose as much as when the Republicans are in there. But when do we start actually making gains? And but I mean, I think this is a tough one. I'm going to let you speak to it in a minute instead of just letting me give a monologue here. But Joe Biden marched on the picket line with the United Auto Workers. Donald Trump went to a non-union factory down the road in Michigan at the same time, and was basically snubbing his nose at the union, I think. So how do we get union people to demand more, and what are we demanding? I mean, some union people are going to be there. I don't want to say I'm going to be there, like I said, and I think some unions will endorse this march, but it's a tough lift for you.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think there are some gestures that the Democratic Party has done, like marching with labor leaders, and I think that is a good thing. I'm not saying that they shouldn't do that, and I don't really, I try not to make suggestions to the people in power. I only make demands because those when you say, oh, I think Biden should be doing this, I think Biden should be doing that, it doesn't really matter if you don't have a mass movement that is also saying that Biden should be doing this and doing that. So as far as the labor movement, we watched Biden stop a railway strike. Um, and, a few months later, we had this string of uh, rail accidents that were, disastrous for the environment. So, we, as a movement, in the labor movement, we understand what our concrete needs are. We need to be able to unionize. We need to be able to strike, because we are up against management that does not care about us in the slightest. So um, you know, there it's like I don't begrudge any labor leaders who aren't going to be at the march on the DNC. But I am calling on their membership. I'm calling on anybody who's in a union to be at that march, because um, we are demanding that the Democratic Party defend the right to unionize against the attacks that are happening on unions. And that's one of the biggest problems with the Democratic Party, is that um, they won't attack as much. They don't attack us as much as the Republicans do. But whereas they promise to defend those attacks, they don't actually do that. They don't actually defend us from the attacks that the Republicans uh, are bringing against us. So um, we're bringing up that demand to the Democratic National Convention in August, that the Democratic Party actually defend the labor movement, actually be a friend to the labor movement, and not just do gestures.
No, that's a good answer. I appreciate that. And your example about the rail workers is a good one as well. I mean, for those our Fight Back Radio listeners who maybe don't remember or didn't know it, the railroad workers were in a position, they were ready, willing, and able to strike and really shut down this country. And it was Biden and the Democrats who stepped in because they're under the Railway Labor Act. I won't get into the weeds on that too much, but basically, took their power away from them. And yes, I agree with that. It's something that we need deeds, not just words, and so that's a good point. I want to pivot back. I mean, we talked a lot at the front end of this about Palestine, and certainly that's an important situation. Especially the war looks like it might be extending there potentially as we go to press here now, or we release this with skirmishes with Yemen and Lebanon. Potentially even drawing the United States into the war. Could you talk about that a little bit and your views on this expanding war just beyond just what's going on in Israel, Palestine, but also what's going on in the larger Middle East?
Yeah, there's one of our demands is justice, peace, and equality. And when we were brainstorming our demands, we had it as peace, justice, and equality first. That's actually, I think, what the March on the RNC has. And so we're like in unity with them. But at the same time, there's a very unjust situation where, the Israeli occupation forces can impose a blockade on Gaza for, almost 20 years. And when Yemen, in response to a genocide, in response to an ongoing genocide, decides to put a blockade on Israeli ships or ships heading to Israel, all of a sudden there's an outrage on the part of these imperialist Western countries. that shows a very deep inequality globally. The fact that the U.S. government has, for decades, for more than a century, has felt like it can go to other countries and dictate what those countries do and impose, systems and policies on those countries for the sake of, extracting resources and extracting labor from those countries. That's something that we have to bring to an end. As people living in the belly of the beast in the United States, we have to stand up against that and say that that can't keep happening, especially with our tax dollars. So, of course, we want to avoid, we want to bring peace, and it has to be, peace with justice and equality as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm thinking about the international situation. Biden is, besides just being Genocide Joe, he's also, in terms of saber rattling and, war preparations, is much of a militarist of a president as we've had, I think. I look at the sanctions. Trump reimposed sanctions on Cuba. Biden really hasn't let them up. The sanctions on Venezuela, which relates to some of the immigrant crisis that's going on in the United States, is because of sanctions that have been imposed on other countries around the world, and especially as countries in South America and Central America try to flex their muscles and try to get out from under the yoke of U.S. just dominating their economy in such a grand way. Could you talk a little bit about Biden, more broadly in terms of his foreign policy?
Yeah, I know you asked for a more broad response, but I'm going to talk about Palestine again because
That's you go for it. You're the guest.
um, you know, there's a video from like 40 years ago where Biden is talking, and he's saying that if there were not an Israel, then the U.S. would have to invent one. This is somebody who, while he was saying that, he was showing a very deep understanding of why the United States does what it does. Because they want the resources, they have, strategic policy objectives in all these different places. So, of course, in Palestine, Israel is like the attack dog of the United States government. And, that's why they give it so much resources to do whatever it wants, regardless of how isolating that is, on a like politically on a global scale. And at the same time, they want to extract resources from every other country in the world. From on every continent, there are these outposts where the U.S. That the U.S. uses to extract as much profit as possible, for corporations, and it's also important to remember that all of this, the money that's going to Ukraine, the money that is being used to sanction Venezuela, the money that's being used to bomb Yemen, all of that. And I also, of course, have to mention the Philippines, the money that is being used to support the fascist dictatorship in the Philippines. All of that is paid for with the taxes of, working class and oppressed people in the United States. So we have to be aware of all of that. I've heard people say, well, that doesn't affect me. I just have to live my life, and I understand the impulse, but it does affect you. That's like half of your taxes, half of the taxes that come out of your check, instead of going to education and healthcare and jobs and housing and things that would benefit you and your community. That's going to murdering and terrorizing people all over the world.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
Well, yeah, and specifically, Biden is somebody who is very deeply committed to using your tax money for that purpose instead of for helping people. So if we want him, or if we want the government or the Democratic Party to actually put our tax money to good use, we have to show up in our numbers and demand that they do that.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think Biden is, more nakedly loyal to U.S.'s imperial goals around the world and domination than previous presidents. But I want to ask this. I mean, I know, like I'm in my mid 60s right now, and for the entirety of my life, the U.S. economy has been the largest in the world. And that is no longer the case or won't be the case very soon. They're about even with China right now, and China's growing and at a pace much quicker than the United States. And so, pretty much all economists agree with what I just said. And so the U.S. looks at China as a rival, and much of what they're trying to do, I think, is prepare for a war with China. They've been pretty blatant about breaking their treaties that they've made with China in the early '70s, and they're sending people to go to Taiwan, and I mean this is a I think that this is extremely dangerous. Could you talk a little bit about again about foreign policy and then not just China, but it's like NATO expansion has led to war in the Ukraine. I mean even Trump was having discussions with Korea, but that seems to have collapsed under Biden as well. And so can you talk a little bit about this is like going back to a Cold War policy of much like the United States had for decades with the Soviet Union of just, saber-rattling, building up defenses, and what is, how do we break through this, I guess, and what are demands on the Biden administration in this regard?
Yeah, I'll speak very briefly because I think there's one demand that's on our banner, the coalition to march in the DNC that we haven't gotten to yet. But it's the tendency of the imperialist system, the system that we're living in right now, to keep expanding and keep trying to go to other countries and take as much resources and as much labor as it can, and since China got out of that, since China has gone from being a colonized country, a country where all these different European and Western powers came to, get their pound of flesh. It's gone from being that country to being one of the superpowers of the world. Of course, the imperialist system is going to try to, the U.S. imperialists are going to try to topple that, to fight against that. So they take increasingly rash measures. Under Trump, it was the assassination of Soleimani, among many other things. But now under Biden, we're seeing what's happening in Palestine. We're seeing what's happening in Ukraine with Russia, and we're also seeing more and more freezing of relations, like you said, with Korea. And all of that is very, very bad for not just for us in the U.S., but it's horrible for the world, for the planet, for the people, and for the environment. It's the prospect of like a World War III is really scary when everybody has nukes. So that's something that we as people who actually care about people, as people who actually care about the planet, we have a responsibility to tell our government to get out of other people's business. Hands off of Yemen, hands off of Iran, hands off Venezuela. It's our responsibility to say all of these things, and to mobilize around these things, because otherwise, the imperialists who are in power currently, who run this country, will drive us to the brink of extinction. And we really have the ability to stop that, and we have the responsibility to stop that.
Yeah. So let's get to the last demand then I think it's the demand about LGBTQ rights and reproductive rights and full equality for women. I mean, I'm not saying the way it's phrased correctly, most likely here, yeah. Again, I think a lot of people, especially comparing Trump to Biden, would say, well, Biden may not be all that, or the Democrats may not be all that, but geez, I mean, Trump supported a rape culture and whatever. He set the bar as low as I've ever seen it set by a major politician in the United States. So what's our hope around what's our demands around LGBTQ rights, and why should um, why should women and LGBTQ supporters march with you in this march on the Democratic National Convention?
Yeah, so the demand is phrased as defend LGBTQ and reproductive rights, and that's another one, just like the demand around uh, the right to unionize and strike, um, where the attacks are coming from the right wing, from the far right wing, from Republicans, on specifically on LGBTQ rights, and well, actually, I mean, on both of them, not specifically, but you know we're not seeing any defense from the people who used those attacks from Republicans to get votes. The people who said, "Hey, look, the Republicans want to take away Roe v. Wade," and now when Joe Biden is in power and the Democrats have the ability and the responsibility to codify Roe v. Wade into law, what did they do? Instead, they let the Supreme Court strike it down. So, um, you know, the situation for women and for LGBTQ people is getting worse under a Democratic president, and that's because the president has not defended their rights in any way. And so that's the demand that we're bringing um, to the Democratic National Convention.
So, okay, so I want to go back to this criticism. Okay, so the Democratic Party represents the richest people in the United States, just as the Republican Party does. So they're both parties of the uber rich or the imperialist ruling class of the United States. And so, I mean, when it comes to election day, what's our guidance? Are we telling people don't vote, or vote for the lesser of two evils, or vote for a third party? I mean, it seems like our options are pretty weak here. So what's the answer to all this?
Well, the options are very weak, and I think I'm not telling people not to vote, and I'm not telling people to, I wouldn't insult my Palestinian siblings by telling them to vote for somebody who is at this moment committing a genocide against them. So, right now, that's something that I can't even really say, who people should vote for on the presidential level. I think, there definitely are people, like you've said, who are much better on the local level. And I think, uh, that's where we can get into like who people should vote for on that level, because there are also those elections are also happening. But uh, between now and November, I might say something else. I might I might, when more information comes out, I might give a different answer. But right now, I think the main thing that people should focus on is mobilizing in the streets, mobilizing around specific demands. In the Chicago Alliance, as long as I've been there, um, we've had a saying that we don't push politicians, we push issues. So we're pushing the issue of ending the genocide in Palestine. We're pushing the issue of defending the right to unionize, defending LGBTQ rights, defending immigrant rights. We're pushing the issue of stopping police crimes and of community control of the police. Money for jobs, school, healthcare, housing, and the environment, and not for war. We're pushing the issue of justice, peace, and equality. And, when we do that, when we show up in our numbers, that's when the politicians have a real choice to make of whether they want to keep their jobs or not, because I think like I said before, the best path that the Democratic Party leadership has is to listen to the demands of the people and to actually act on the demands of the people, and follow through on those promises that they made to those people who got them elected. And if they start doing that, then maybe I'll say something different. But right now, all I'm telling people to do is to get out to these marches, mobilize their communities around the issues and not not around specific individual politicians.
So we need to let Genocide Joe know that we're going to be in the streets of Chicago in August. Let me ask you also. There's going to be a conference before the march in August here in Chicago. Could you tell our Fight Back Radio listeners a little bit about that conference, and if they're interested in coming, how they can register or go to that?
Yeah, so that is going to be a national conference, and we're going to be going over all of these demands. We're going to be talking about how exactly we're going to mobilize for this for our march in August, and so I'm inviting everybody. There will be more information available on our website, which is marchondnc2024.org. And our social media is all also March on DNC 2024. That's Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I don't think we have a TikTok yet, but we might have to make one. But that conference is happening April 13th, and there will be some mobilizations as well between April 13th and August 19th, which is when the march in the DNC is happening. And last thing I'll say about as far as conferences, there's another conference, the conference for the coalition to march on the RNC is happening next month, February 17th. So some of us will be there, mobilizing for the march on the RNC as well and building that unity.
So whatever the voting thing turns out, we're going to be marching in Milwaukee against the Republican National Convention, and in Chicago against the Democratic National Convention. These conferences are geared to let people know, maybe to meet each other and to talk, and for groups to get more involved and to scout out some of the planning. Am I right about that? Is that the direction we're heading here?
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's so that we can meet each other, so that we can learn about the day-to-day work that we're all doing, and so that we can solidify our plans for these upcoming conventions. So yeah, it's going to be a very hot summer in the Midwest.
All right, and we need to lift each other up too, whether you're involved in immigrant rights or sort of fighting for justice for Palestine or trying to form a union. Whatever your activism is, whatever your life situation is, we need to make things better. We need to make demands on the most rich people in this country. So this is an opportunity, I think, to do that. Unfortunately, we're winding down, Kobi. This has been whatever. I've enjoyed this discussion. But is there anything that we haven't mentioned so far that you'd like to say?
I think we covered a lot, actually. But I just want to reiterate, that if you are trying to fight for a better world, you have to actually go out and fight for it, and not hope that somebody will go into a position that is bought and paid for by the ruling class and fight for it for you. Even when we get people into positions of power, like in Chicago, even after we got the Empowering Communities for Public Safety ordinance passed, we are still mobilizing people in the streets. We just, by getting that position of power, by getting that little pinch of power that we have, we just gave ourselves more work to do in actually using the positions of those local police district councilors. And we're finding out that it's the same with Brandon Johnson. We won that victory of getting him elected, but that's not where the mass movement ends. That's just another beginning and another place for us to keep moving. So beyond the March on the DNC and building up to the March on the DNC and the RNC, I just want to encourage everybody to stay in the streets for Palestine, stay in the streets around all the other issues that working class and oppressed people have to fight for, because that's the only way that we're going to win.
Okay, so Kobi Guillory, spokesperson for the Coalition to March on the Democratic National Convention. Thank you for being our guest on Fight Back Radio.
Thank you again for having me.
Okay, so that was Kobi Guillory, and I think we want to see you here in Chicago on August 19th to march on the Democratic National Convention. We're also going to have a conference to motivate that on April 13th here in Chicago. So come, march on the Democratic Convention, come to our conference, get your organization to support the March on the Democratic Party National Convention. Also, I want to say, people, we don't want to just single out the Democrats. March on the Republicans too. The Republican National Convention is July 15th, and their conference is going to be February 17th, both in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So, we hope to see you at both of those things. There's no place, it's cold right now in Chicago, but there's no place better than Chicago in the summertime. And so come to the convention, march, do the righteous thing, and if you wish, stay a little while, meet some of the activists in Chicago. I think you'll enjoy it. I want to, before I move on, I wanted to do a little self-criticism here. I should have asked Kobi about the environmental movement. I want to give a shout out to all our sisters and brothers, siblings who are fighting so hard to save our planet and to get us on the right track in terms of environmental protection and against climate change and these sorts of things. This is such important work to do. And as I was going through the whole umbrella of things, I didn't mention that. So that was my bad. But we expect environmentalists, along with peace activists, trade unionists, people fighting for liberation of oppressed nationalities, whether they're black, brown, or other, all to be here in Chicago. So we look forward to seeing you and bringing us all together to march on the Democratic Party National Convention. So, shout out to the environmental activists, but also shout out to everybody else. Also on Black History Month, read a book, check out a program, put something in our comments if there's one, if you want to recommend something. If you want to reach us, you can reach us, and I check all the emails on this too, by the way. It's richard.fightbackradio@gmail.com. And so then finally, I wanted to say, on the March on the Democratic National Convention, April 13th is the conference. August 19th is the march. The Republicans, their conference is February 17th. Their march is going to be July 15th in Milwaukee. So make those things part of your schedule. And then, finally, there is no Fight Back Radio without our crack production team of Dodd McColgan, Shane Tremley, Natalie Pranis, and Vince Olson. And so for the entire Fight Back Radio team, I'm Richard Berg saying until next time, all power to the people. Okay, so we're recording now. Just let me know whenever you're ready.
Okay. Yeah, I just don't want to see myself in one of those outtakes.
Yeah. You probably that's what they're gonna put on there. What you just said.